y'all, it's Heather, and today we are talking all about indie eyeshadow palettes. I love independently owned makeup brands. I think they're innovative, fun, they bring us unique textures, different formulas, interesting color stories, and I want to share with you my #1 palette from every single indie brand in my collection. I've got a huge stack of palettes here in front of me. I've been shopping my stash. Let's jump into it. Let's start with the palette that's on my eyes today. This is the Not Normal Remastered palette from Unearthly. Unearthly Cosmetics is a favorite brand for me. I did collaborate with them on the Heather Austin collection. We made a Resurgence collection. I have tons of their palettes, and it was really hard for me to choose. It was really hard for me to narrow down and pick a favorite, but last year they launched the Not Normal Remastered palette. It's an updated version of an older palette in their collection, and I love this palette so much. I cannot get over it. I do have an olive undertone to my skin, and having this palette with these olive undertone neutrals in it, having a palette that has these green shades, olive shades, some little bit of lime, but very grungy in tone, paired with these beautiful purple shadows, I cannot get enough of this palette. The mattes in here are beautiful. They are pigmented, but they are also easy to blend. I don't have any trouble with these shadows, which is consistent with what I know, love, and expect from Unearthly. They make amazing formulas and shadows. The shimmers in here are very beautiful. They look wet on the lid. Some of these have a little bit of shift to them. They have a little bit of like this extra sparkle. Some of these are this foiled type of formula, and overall this is just a stunning palette. This is a very me type of color story. I love neutrals with that olive undertone. I love greens. I love purples, and this palette goes from light to dark, which is also something I love. I love when palettes can give me variety. They can go light to dark. I can get a variety of different looks out of them. That's what can make a favorite for me, and I'm super excited. I just love this palette, and I had to share with y'all because I love to Not Normal, and I love the remastered version. It's so good. It's expanded, it's updated, it's new, it's now. I'm so here for it. I do have an affiliated code with Unearthly. If you're ever shopping their site, you can use code Heather, and as we talk today, I will of course pop any codes I have up on the screen for you, and I will list and link everything I can down in the description box and in a pinned comment. What's Up Beauty had a clear winner for me. This is the Dragon Eye palette, and of course this is my favorite. I love this packaging. I love all things like myth, lore, legend, mythology, all of that. This Dragon palette, it is so fun. It's so different. The packaging is so intricate, and the color story inside is really beautiful. They gave us these shimmer shifty shadows that have this kind of green lean to them. They paired them with some beautiful purpley pinky neutral leaning mattes, and I love this palette. The formulas are silky, they're luxurious. This palette is made in Italy, and I feel like this is luxury shadows. High quality, beautiful, in love. I love this palette. I love this palette. It was the clear winner. Adept Cosmetics is a favorite brand for me, and it was so hard to pick a favorite palette. I've been using this brand for years. I collaborated with them. We created the Heather Austin palette. It's my baby. It's my heart. You know, like, I love Adept. And when I'm thinking about my favorite palettes outside of mine, because I'm not picking any collaborations, my friend Amy collaborated with Adept and made a beautiful palette, but I didn't let myself pick any collaborations because I didn't want to be swayed or influenced. Although, just know, if these brands have collaborations with other creators, I love, okay? Like, I probably have a video on it. But my mind immediately went to the Inspired palette. This one is discontinued. You can no longer get this one. This was limited edition when it launched. It sold out. I believe Adept brought it back 1 or 2 more times, and it's a favorite for me. I love green. It's my favorite color. But since this is a limited edition palette, it's gone. I don't know if Adept is ever bringing this back. I decided I need to pick another palette. So I was looking through my collection because I want to tell y'all if a limited edition palette is my favorite, but I also want to give you options, you know, in case you want to try some of these brands. And I thought about Flying Fiddles. I love this palette. I love this palette. This is a favorite for me. It's a beautiful, like, spicy neutral palette, interesting neutral palette, neutrals with a twist type of palette. It's a favorite, but ultimately I had to give the win to Sumerian Sunset. This is such a good palette. This is such a good palette. And this is warm. This is warm, beautiful, fiery shimmers. And it's very colorful while also being approachable for neutral lovers, in my opinion, because we do have some really kind of muted tones down here in our matte shades, and we have some muted tones in our shimmers as well as poppy, intense shift type shadows. There's just some favorite shades in this palette for me, and it had to be the choice. It had to be the win after the collabs and the inspired palette. I love the red, orangey, yellow fieriness of this palette. I love that it's grounded with these more muted green colors. It's a very me type of palette. I love warmth. I love greens. I love interesting shades. I love everything about this palette. I cannot help it. I think the packaging is beautiful. I think the mirror inside is beautiful. I love the tones that these shades shift to. So we have these like fiery shades that go from like orange to yellow gold to peach to bronze. We have a variety in here. And when I'm looking at my favorite palettes, I want some variety. Let me create looks. Don't make all my looks the same. Give me options, and this Sumerian Sunset palette gives me options. I think the packaging is cute with the ombre effect. Everything about this palette I just love, so I had to give it to this one. Let's talk about Sigma. Sigma Beauty is a favorite brand for me, and I immediately thought of my Cinderella palette. I love Cinderella. It has the nostalgia for me, and I always say that these Disney collabs that Sigma does is a perfect palette, a perfect collaboration for me. I'm 37 years old. I loved Disney growing up, and they give Disney in a way that is for adults, like luxury Disney. And I love my Cinderella palette. I have fond memories of ordering this palette. I was actually on vacation with my family. My niece was an infant. I had her up there with me, and we were on the Sigma site on launch day waiting to get this palette, and I love it. It's a me color story. It's intense. It's beautiful, but this palette is discontinued. So I'm like, Heather, what is your second palette choice? And would you know what? It's another Disney collab. I can't be stopped, okay? I love the way they do Disney. This is their Alice in Wonderland collaboration. And what I love about this palette is we have color and we have neutral. We have warm tones and we have cool tones in here. And I think that's really unique, different, and special about this palette. I do have videos on most of the palettes that I'm going to talk about today, so definitely check those out if you want to know more. But I love everything about this palette. I think it's super beautiful. Sigma is very beautiful in formula, very easy to work with, and it does not emphasize texture. So it can be very beautiful if you have texture on your lids, if you need formulas to glide smoothly, and I will reach for them if I have dry patches or anything like that. I love their shadows. And yes, even though Sigma is sold in department stores, they're sold at Target, they're sold at a ton of different retailers, they are an independently owned, family owned brand, and I love that. Let's talk about Arttitude Cosmetics next. I chose the Untamed palette. This is such a fun, beautiful palette, and Arttitude is a UK-based indie brand. This palette has so many options. It is colorful. It is like this tropical, vibrant story inside, and I'm so here for it. They gave us beautiful green shades, which I don't know if I've said 1,000 times yet, but I love green shades. They gave us some yellow, some orangey tones. They gave us a little bit of this like maroon burgundy type of color with some pinks. We have a little bit of neutral in here with the bronzy shades and the brown and the black. So we have options in this palette. There's a little bit of a pop of blue. I love this palette because this is a curated color story, but they somehow made it have so many different options. Like we have unique shades, we have different colors, we have possibilities, but it's still curated. It's not the rainbow. It's unique tones that work well within this palette, and I love it. I just absolutely love it. Did you know that Melt Cosmetics is an indie brand? It is independently owned, and yes, they are sold at Nordstrom, they are sold at Sephora, lots of different retailers, but Melt is independently owned, and I love the Gemini palette. I love that they've collaborated with Bailey Sarian. I love my Nightmare Before Christmas, my Beetlejuice collection, a lot of things from the brand brand I really love, but I absolutely love my Gemini palette. This is the first eyeshadow palette that I ever tried from the brand. They've since updated the packaging, which I so enjoy, and it still has a color story to me that is a staple. It's strong, it's here. The formulas of Melt are very intense and beautiful. Every single shade in this palette I love, and it just all works so beautifully together. I really, really, really cannot forget about my Gemini palette. It's nostalgic to me. It's so many years old. It's still like a classic, staple, fun, grungy palette for 2025. I had a hard time when I sat down with my collection from Nomad because they have some really cool color stories. They are a brand that is all about travel, destination themed palettes. My first thought was my Okavango Safari palette. I was thinking about the browns and the greens, and that's kind of where my mind immediately went. And I'm like, this is my favorite from the brand. But last year, they released a palette that kicked that palette out of the #1 spot, and that is the Chicago Speakeasy palette. I love this palette. It's got this really cool, like, pillowy cushion type packaging, super unique, and then the inside is just, it does something to me when I look at this. We have gorgeous, gorgeous warm tone brown shadows. We even have this warm tone brown that's more of like a red undertone. It's really, really beautiful. We have this column of green shadows, so we have the greens in here, and then we have 2 columns of these purpley mauve toned colors. There's something about these shades that just speak to me. They work together. They're absolutely beautiful. I love that we have like 2 rows of matte shadows. We have a middle row of metallic like shimmers with a shift to them. We have a lot of sparkle, a lot of shine, and every shade in here is just such great quality. It is so hard for me to pick favorites. Like, I love eyeshadow palettes, and these brands have so many palettes that I love. Some of these brands, I've been using their palettes and shadows for years. Some of these are a little bit newer to me, but it's just like the ones that have been around for so long, like Nomad, it's so hard to pick favorites. I love the Okavango Safari. Ask me tomorrow, maybe this one will beat out Chicago Speakeasy, but since I can only pick one and we're playing favorites today, I had to give it to Chicago Speakeasy. Let's talk about Blend Bunny because they have some amazing palettes, some absolute favorites for me. And last year I did fall in love with the Divination palette, Robert Welsh and Blend Bunny, and I said I'm not talking about collaboration palettes in this video, and I have had this favorite for years. It is the All Done Up palette. This is a staple palette for me. I hope that they keep this one around forever because this is such a great palette. I love this format and this layout from Blend Bunny. I love that we have greens, yellows, warm browns, cool browns. We have this cool kind of white, gray, black row. I love that we have this variety of shimmers that are so sparkly and beautiful and intense down here at the bottom. I love that we have these beautiful deep shades, mid-tone shades, light shades, all in matte. So it's easy to create a beautiful cohesive look with this palette. If you just want to stick to the columns, you can kind of jump around and mix and match and create a beautiful look that's always going to be cohesive. There's just something so special about this palette. The formulas from Blend Bunny are always beautiful and insanely easy to blend and pigmented at the same time. But this color story, it's just so yummy. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's everything. Let's talk about BellaBeauteBar because I could not decide on BellaBeauteBar. I initially wanted to pick my Strange and Unusual palette. I love that palette. It's so good. It's so yummy. It's colorful. It's grungy. And maybe that one would be my winner tomorrow. I don't know. I had to pick one though, and I just cannot get Poison Garden out of my head. I love this palette. This is such a great one. I know I've talked on and on and on, especially here recently, about this palette, and there's something so special about this color story. It has these like fall, autumn classic colors that I'm really drawn to, like the orange and the yellow and the mossy, dirty greens. We have kind of the berry shades, but we also have these midnight blues. We have variety in here to where we can create warm looks or cool looks if we want to. We have beautiful holographic shades. We have beautiful metallics, beautiful shimmers, beautiful multichromes, beautiful everything. There is not a shade in this palette that I would change. There's nothing about this palette that I would do differently. I just think this is so unique and so beautiful. The formula in every single shadow is perfection. The color, the undertone, everything. This palette, along with a lot of the others that I'm going to talk about today, are magnetic pans, meaning you can rearrange them if you want to. You can mix and match them with your other palettes if you want to, and I think that's super special. When talking about indie brands and talking about how unique they are, that is something that indie brands do super well. They give you like versatility, they really step up packaging, and this is so good. I love this palette. I'm sure if you have been at my channel for a while, you know I love this palette and you're not surprised to see it. Clionadh Cosmetics is a Canadian-based indie brand and they are so popular for their single shadows. That's how I fell in love with the brand. They're stained glass shadows, they're multi-chrome shadows, they're all hand done, and I fell in love with their singles. They've released some beautiful collaboration palettes. Millie Bad to the Brow with their Scattered Lights collection. We have the Dragon Fruit collection with Emily Violet Marie. But looking at their palettes, I had to give it to Oceano. This is such a fun palette. It's so cool and I love it. I love the uniqueness of this palette. I love the uniqueness of the color story. There's something so fun about an ocean themed palette that gives us the blues and the teal shades that we want. Of course, we would expect to see that in an ocean palette, right? But they gave us some different colors in here. Like they pulled these coral shades, which I think it makes so much sense for the palette, but it's also unexpected because if you're thinking ocean, you may just be thinking blue, but they gave us the corals, they gave us some purples, which I think can be really fun, some shifts to purple, and they gave us some green shades for like this seaweed, seagrass, things like that, and it overall makes this palette very cohesive, but also very unique. It's those beautiful Clionadh formulas that I know, love, and expect from the brand, and I'm just so into this. Clionadh is owned by two sisters. Like I said, they are a Canadian-based brand, and I can't get enough of them. I actually recently just placed an order on their site because they released some new quads. I had to have them and they're on their way to me. Like I was on the site purchasing, I had to have them. They're such a good brand. They're such good shadows. I love this palette. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's better than good, right? Like these are favorites. There are just a few indie brands that I only own one eyeshadow palette from the brand. And so I want to let you know that before I tell you my favorite because I only own one, but I do want to highlight a ton of indie brands. I want to show all the ones I have, and if I like their palettes, I want to tell you about it. So my bestie owns the beauty brand Singe Beauty. She's the founder, the creator, the CEO, the designer, like everything, okay? This is her brand Singe, and last year she released the first palette from the brand, Galactic Visitor. So this is the only palette the brand has, so of course this is my favorite from the brand. It's a beautiful color story. We have a beautiful mix of mattes and shimmers and hollow and shades that have beautiful sparkle, and we have a matte formula that is pigmented and easy to work with and easy to blend, and the mattes go from light to dark, the shimmers go light to dark. It gives me everything I want and I love it, and it's beautiful and it's perfect, and I'm so excited for what the brand has coming in the future. Fantasy Cosmetica has been getting better and better and better, and I feel like their newest launches, what they did last year with Amanda from Makeup Just for Fun, a favorite. Their newest Monk palette, a favorite, absolutely beautiful. They're getting better and better, but their top favorite for me is the Harvest of Souls palette. This palette is colorful and grungy and muted and vibrant at the same time. There's options in these shades and we love options here, okay? Something about me is I love variety, I love options. Give me a choice, and this palette does it because we have purples and berries and greens and blues, and there's something so special about the undertones of the shades in this palette. I like that we have light shades and dark shades. We even have this pop of like this like neon-y pastel color that is perfect for the inner corner, perfect for buffing and blending shades out. We have these gorgeous intense berries that are so saturated, paired with these more muted desaturated purples, the teal blues. Everything about this palette is amazing. This is phenomenal. Every single shade in here is perfect. Fantasy Cosmetica, killed it with this palette. I love the shimmers, I love the mattes, I love the hollows, I love the shifts, I love that we have different formulas, I love everything about it, okay? Fantasy Cosmetica, they did it with this one. They really did something special. Cosmic Beauty was such a hard choice for me. They make some of my favorite palettes in my collection, honestly. I love their neutrals palette. It's neutral, it's beautiful, it's perfect. I love the Undergrowth palette. It's grungy, it's olivey with some neutrals. It's perfect. But when I'm looking at all of the palettes from the brand, the first one I ever tried is the Serenity palette, and it still has my love as my favorite, okay? It still is my favorite from the brand because it gives this cool color story and beautiful formulas. I love that we have all these green shades. I love green, okay? I love it. You know it. I've said it 1,000 times, but the purples in here are so cool and different. We have these neutral olive, like brown shade in here with the black. We have beautiful shimmers. We have light shades and deep shades. The pops of blue in here I think are really unique and special and different. And I'm just into this palette. The formula is so amazing. Like, I don't know what to say. Amazing, phenomenal, good, great. Like, whatever you want me to say, I will say it, because this palette is all the positive words, okay? I love it. When I first saw photos of this palette, I knew. I was like, I knew I had to have that palette. I had to try this brand. It was the first one for me, and it has become a top favorite brand for me, but Serenity is still the MVP. Let's talk about GlamLite, because I love GlamLite. I have so many of their palettes. I absolutely love the brand, and I love my Scooby-Doo palettes. This is the first collaboration they did with Scooby-Doo, and I fell in love. I bought the full collection, and I just love. This is the Creeps and Crawls palette. This one over here is more like teal, blue, purple shades. Then we also have the Retro Raggy palette. This one is more greens and blue, teal type of colors. Really, really pretty. Both of these palettes you cannot get your hands on anymore. I don't know if they will ever come back, so I made myself pick options, okay? Am I gonna pick Rick and Morty? Because Rick and Morty is a favorite palette for me. I've never seen the show. I don't know anything about it, but this is one of the best rainbow palettes in my collection. Like, definitely in my top 3. We've got neons, we've got deep shades, we've got options. A palette that I couldn't stop thinking about, I couldn't get out of my mind, is the Garfield palette. I love so many palettes from GlamLite, but the Garfield collaboration they did, it just killed it with these colors. It really did. Like, the formulas in here are beautiful, and there's something so unique about this color story that's not just like orange and black like maybe you would think for Garfield. We have the beautiful oranges, yes, but we have these beautiful brown neutral shades too. We have these beautiful kind of red berry tones with a little bit of purple. We have the, like, I don't know, it's perfect. They really did a good job, and I think with a collaboration there needs to be like this perfect marriage of what the brand is and what the collaboration is, and they did that with this palette, and it still is just absolutely stunning, and it works for makeup. It's not just shades from the show that you can't really create a cohesive makeup look with. It's perfect, it's beautiful, it's stunning. GlamLite, you knocked it out of the park. Lethal Cosmetics has some really cool launches. They do some fun collaborations. They collaborated with my friend Teresa from Teresa is Dead. I have both of her collabs and love them, but I have to give my favorite palette when I'm not looking at Teresa's collabs to the Avatar Last Airbender palette, specifically the Air palette. They did launch some other palettes with this collection. They launched Water and Fire and Earth, but Air was the most unique color story to me. This one's very different, and I think the formulas in here are absolutely beautiful. I love that we have this kind of red coral shade, this yellow, this brown. We have the blue for Air and the white, and we have this like purpley and shifty shadows. I just think this is a great palette from Lethal. The color story just draws me in, and I don't have anything like this in my collection. I think it's very unique, it's very special, and the formulas in here are just top notch. I'm so into this one from Lethal. I did buy their new Dexter collaboration, so let me know if you want me to review that, because I don't think I've talked about it here on my channel, but I bought everything. Oden's is a Swedish-based indie brand, and I love their palettes. They have collaborated with several of my friends. They have some beautiful palettes, but I chose the Stone and Rock palette. They do really great things. They have some great Christmas palettes, but nothing has beat the Stone and Rock palette for me. This is a classic in my collection. This is a staple for me. These green tones, these earthy browns, the shades, the tones, the shift in the multi-chrome, everything about this is perfect and beautiful, and I love it. We have a lot of sparkle to the shimmers. I love that we have a matte white in this palette and we have a black. I feel like that makes this palette super, super versatile. I can lighten things up, I can deepen things up. I have light greens, I have deep greens, I have some grungy brown shades in here. I have a cute like olivey brown in here, and I have everything I need to create these grungy green looks that I love. Again, that olive is always gonna get me. I'm gonna love it, I'm gonna love it. And I love that we have this kind of like black diamond wet oceany liquid dark type of color in here. I don't know how to describe it, but I love it. This is really a great palette from the brand. I love Oden's Eye. I think they bring out a lot of fun palettes. I love that they do these like holiday palettes for Christmas time. I love that we get these like staple launches throughout the year, these fun collaborations. They just really bring some cool formulas and cool color stories out, and it makes me love the brand even more with every launch. I just think they do some really, really cool things. High quality shadows. I love their highlighters. I love their blushes. I love their singles. I really, really love the brand. They make amazing products, but Stone and Rock, like it's so perfect. When I was looking at my palettes from Gourmande Girls, I did not have an easy time because for the past few years, they've really done some cool palettes specifically around like Halloween and different holidays, and I could not really narrow it down, but I made myself pick a palette and I decided to go with their most recent palette, the Bitten palette, because there's something super special about these formulas and this color story. I don't have a color story like this Bitten palette in my collection. It's different. We have beautiful purpley tones, and that's kind of where my eye first goes, is like, okay, it's purples, but there's something unique with this kind of like green, gray, blue color that they added in. I think that makes it very different and special. And then we kind of have these like raspberry pinky purples. We have this beautiful pink to white purpley shift. We have a little bit of gray. We have some dark shades. We have some light shades. And Gourmande Girls, they just did something special with this palette. I think it's so pretty. I've had so much fun using this one. And when I'm looking at all of my palettes, I think this color story is just cool. I want to play with it. I want to create with it. I feel inspired. The formulas in here are beautiful. The mattes in here, the shimmers in here. We have different textures, different like ways that they're going to look on the eyes, and I enjoy that. I think this is special. I think this is beautiful and fun. I love that Gourmande Girls does these different embossings on the pan. Like we have a bat and we have lips and we have diamonds and the logo, and I'm here for it. They created something really, really cool with this, and I think the brand is really stepping it up and doing some fun things. Kaleidos is a brand that has been doing a lot of quads these past couple of years. They haven't had a lot of new eyeshadow palette releases or makeup, but I really love the brand and their eyeshadow formulas. I had to give my favorite to the Flower Punk palette. I don't think this one is still made, but look at this. I mean, greens and pinks and these beautiful light blue colors. This is a unique palette in my collection. It does not go like super dark. It has mostly mid-tone to light shades, but the shadows are so great. Kaleidos has a beautiful eyeshadow formula. They have really cool packaging, and I like their quads. I think they're cute. They're small, they're curated, but the Flower Punk palette has to be my favorite. Simply Posh reformulated their Citrus Punch palette, and this is my favorite from the brand. They make some really cool palettes, but this color story gets me every time. It's so citrus, so summer, and I love it. I mean, wear your shadows when you want to. The seasons don't tell you what to do, but this is definitely like a summer vibes palette for me. That's what it makes me think of. I love these yellows and oranges and hot pinks and bright greens, and then we do have the depth down here with the blood orange shades. It's just really, really cool. They have a huge row of duochromes that kind of fit with each column of shadows. So you do have matte shades that pair with the duochromes. These are beautiful. Simply Posh, they do these cute embossings on the pan. So we have all these little citrus slices on our matte shadows, which I really like. Every shade works together. They blend well, they apply well. There's not a lot of fallout. They're not messy. They're not difficult to work with. It's just a beautiful palette. This is super colorful, super fun. I love that we have light shades and dark shades. I love it. I think this is such a win from the brand. And I really like Simply Posh as a brand overall. I think they make some really cool palettes, but that one is my favorite. Klarity Cosmetics has quickly become a brand that makes me so excited when it comes to eyeshadows. I really started trying out their formulas last year. Although I had tried them years and years ago, I just really loved their formula last year, and I had a hard time picking because they released some amazing palettes, but the Angry Leprechaun, I can't quit talking about it. I know you're probably like, Heather, we've heard how much you love this palette so many times if you're not new here, but look at this color story and tell me, how am I not supposed to keep talking about this palette? Because I just can't. I can't stop talking about this palette. We have neutrals. We have these beautiful warm brown shades. We have this kind of like red, deep, dark shade that goes with this matte black, and we have these beautiful greens. We have this gold. We have options. I'm so into it. I can't stop. There's something so special and unique and fun about this palette. I love the shades. I love the curation. I love the formulas. They're so pigmented, so beautiful, so intense. I'm here for it. Glaminatrix is an Australian-based indie brand, and I picked their Barely Basic palette. This palette is not basic, but I understand why they called it Barely Basic, because we have beautiful, beautiful neutral shades in here. We have warm neutrals, cool tone neutrals, but we have these plum, purpley, mauvey tones, and we have these olivey greens. The shadows in here are stunning. I love that we have light mattes, mid-tone mattes, dark mattes. I love that we have very light shimmer and these more mid-tone shimmers. So you have everything you need in each column to create a cohesive look, or you can jump around the palette, of course, but they gave us an easy layout. They gave us a layout for a palette that just makes sense, and they gave us the beautiful Glaminatrix formula. So we have mattes that are pigmented, buttery, easy to blend, easy to work with, beautiful shifty shimmers. I mean, this palette, like if you just look at it straight on, it can look like there's a row of white shimmer shadows, but they all have this like shift and shine to them to where we have shades that really fit in each column, and it's just perfect. Glaminatrix, they make beautiful shadows. It was hard to pick a favorite, but this one had to win. This is the Sorceress palette from Jolie Beauty, and this is an old palette, years old, but this is what made me fall in love with the brand. This was my first purchase from the brand. This was my first time trying their shadows. And wow, they blew me away. They blew me away. This is gorgeous. We do have some pressed glitters in here, which I'm not normally a fan of pressed glitters, but I will say, in terms of the pressed glitters, Jolie Beauty did a good job in this palette. We have two multi-chrome shadows. We have some really beautiful shimmers in here, some really beautiful mattes. This formula is a little bit more thin in the mattes. You can pack them on and really build them up to an intense color. If you want sheer, more light shadows with your browns and your grays, you can definitely achieve that, but these pack on and layer so well. I'm so into this. These are so beautiful. This color story is so beautiful, and Jolie Beauty has released some really fun palettes, but I have to say, like, for me, none of them have topped this one. It's just a personal favorite for me. DeDe Signature really perfected their formula, in my opinion, with their Fearless Holiday palette from last year. This palette, oh, it's so good. And DeDe Signature, they have some beautiful shadows, some beautiful color stories, but they gave us even more with this palette, and we all know, like, more is more. They did it. They did it. They gave us a beautiful color story. They gave us a little bit of neutral with the browns in here, and then more with the purples and the berries and the oranges and the reds and the greens, and it's this really, really cool palette. You can definitely stick with the rose and create a beautiful cohesive look, which I think is a very smart layout. We have some light mattes, some deep dark mattes. We have some beautiful shimmer shadows in here, and the formula is just spectacular. I'm so excited about DeDe's Signature as a brand. I think that they just perfected their formula with this palette. I love the looks I've created. Every time I reach for this palette, I'm just so happy to be working with these gorgeous shadows because they make blending a dream. It's just, oh, DeDe's Signature, the formulas inside that palette, so good. DeDe Cosmetics is another creator-owned, independently owned brand, and I picked the Gloomy Gardens palette. First of all, I love this packaging. I think the artwork is so beautiful. There's something so dark and romantic about this packaging, but opening up the palette inside, this color story just fits. It fits the whole theme. I get the Gloomy Garden vibe. I love that we have these warm orangey peachy tones paired with these purpley shades and then with these cool tone kind of gray and blue shades mixed with the olives. There's something really beautiful about it. The mattes are beautiful, the shimmers are beautiful, but I love this color story. The color story is what really just pushed this palette to the top favorite for me from the brand. We have magnetic pans. We have, stop. It's beautiful. I love it. Game Beauty is an independently owned brand that is based around games, mostly video games, and I had to pick their Elemental Blast palette in Geo. This is such a cool collection. They launched highlighters, they launched palettes, and I really love the palettes, but this neutral one is so unique and different in their tones, and that's what really made it a win for me. We have deep, dark, kind of like cool tone brown mattes, and then we have these kind of orangey mattes up here, these kind of vanilla shades. We have a like multi-chrome type shift shadow, but still very neutral. It's a cool launch. It was a full collection that I thought was very cool, different, unique, interesting for the brand, and this one has got to be my favorite. I really like them all. Definitely check out my video if you want to see them in action, but I had to pick a favorite and it was not easy. Wicked Widow Beauty has done some really fun palettes. They did a Crow collaboration. They released a really cool palette for fall, but my top favorite from the brand is still the Resurrection palette. This is like, oh, it's such a gorgeous palette. I know you may be thinking it's a rainbow palette, but there's something deep and saturated and grungy and different about the undertones in this palette. And if you've been here since I talked about this one and I made a video on it, please raise your hands in the comments because I love this palette, and I know I went on and on and on about it. We have a white and a black. This white is kind of more of like a vanilla-y, like dirty type white, and I'm so into that. We have these beautiful fiery tones over here. We have olives and we have a dark green. We have different shades of blue and purple. We have the cool tones. I just love this. We have some really beautiful shimmers in here that shift, like multi-chrome shimmers in a rainbow palette. We have beautiful undertones. There's something so like almost a dirty rainbow about this palette. I hope that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, you know? It's Wicked Widow's version of the rainbow, and I'm here for it, and I love it, and I think it's stunning. I love that we have these different tones. I love that we have options. This is a large palette, but honestly, this rainbow palette, oh, stop, don't play with me. I love it. It's so good. Wicked Widow Beauty killed it with this one. I've been trying Electrum Cosmetics for several years now, and their palette that they launched last year is my favorite. It's the Blood Moon palette. This one has such cool packaging, but the shades inside are deep and dark, and they're so Blood Moon. I'm here for it. Electrum Cosmetics makes beautiful shimmery shadows, but I feel like last year they really kind of worked on and perfected their matte formula. They're very beautiful. They're very intensely pigmented, and I like that in this palette we do have some dark shades, but we also have some mid-tone mattes to kind of buff and blend out with if that's something you like to do. I like to do that a lot. Take a deep shade and kind of buff it out with a shade that's more mid-tone or light. I love that we have like the holographic shades in here. We have multi-chromes in here. We have everything we could need. It's absolutely beautiful. They killed it. Like Electrum, they really have a special palette on their hands with that one. I only have one palette, and there is is only one palette from the brand Get Stoned, but I instantly fell in love with this one and I wanted to talk about it because this is a great palette from an independently owned, woman-owned brand. Look at these shimmers. These are all shimmery, sparkly shadows and they're so beautiful. I really love the shades inside of here. If you are looking for a palette of shimmers to add to your collection, you want to have some really beautiful shades, some neutrals, and some colors. I don't think you can go wrong with Get Stoned. I don't have a ton of palettes from Sydney Grace, and I would really love to try more from the brand. Of course, I do love my Tiny Marvels palette from Mel Thompson and Sydney Grace. Very special, very sentimental to me. I also have my Tropicolor palette from Tina, the Fancy Face, my friend. I think she did a beautiful collaboration with Sydney Grace, but I have to not pick collaborations as favorites. I'm giving it to the Heaven on Earth palette. This is the light version of the palette. Sydney Grace also has a deep version to where you have more dark shades instead of some of the light shades. Not all the shades are different, but some of them are. So mine is the light version. We have some beautiful cool tone olives and some beautiful blues. The formulas in here are very smooth, and this is another brand that I think specifically their shadows work on texture. They don't emphasize texture and they glide very beautifully. Sydney Grace makes quality shadows. They're really, really great. They're really, really consistent. And I think this is a beautiful, beautiful palette from the brand. Now, please forgive me if I'm wrong, but I did some Googling and I am fairly sure that Natasha Denona is independently owned. So I wanted to throw in my Natasha Denona palettes. If they're wrong, I'm sorry. If Google was wrong, if I get it wrong, please forgive me. But for a long time, Metropolis was my favorite, okay? Metropolis, it's been gone for years, but it has been my favorite. It has her formulas that I love. Her cream to powders, her shimmers, her metallics, her super sparkly shades. I love it. I love Metropolis. I love this color story. I wish she would redo it. I wish she would bring it back. I don't know that that's gonna happen. My favorite though is Yucca. I mean, if you don't know what it looks like inside, you're gonna understand why it's my favorite. Look, like right? And if you've been here, you're probably like, Heather, we know it's Yucca, okay? Like we know. Look at this like neon yellow, green, yellow, neon pastel, these beautiful shimmers. We have the orangey yellow shades. These are all very like green olive leaning, but with some differences. It's special. It's my favorite. I love it. I could use this palette every day. It's so good. It's so grungy. It's so perfect. It's everything I love about Natasha Denona. Unique color story, unique formulas, so special, so intense, so beautiful. Natasha Denona is a makeup artist. So we will go ahead and go into the next brand, another independently owned makeup artist owned brand, and that is Isamaya. So Isamaya is independently owned as well, as far as I can tell. And I know the brand just had a full rebrand, redid a bunch of their products, and yes, I bought one of everything, I think, because I'm doing a full review. This is their first palette, the Industrial palette. They only have this and the 2.0. I have both. I actually bought the 2.0 first and then went back and bought the Industrial because I love, when I first tried the brand, I was like, you know, is it really worth that high price tag? I don't know. But I just found myself reaching for it more and more and more and more. So I went back and bought the original Industrial. All shimmer shades, all sparkly shades, satin shades, like no mattes in here. This is a fun palette. It's deep, it's dark. It's just cool. It's a cool palette. No regrets, super pricey, but I love it. I only have one palette from MBA, and that is the Forest Nymph palette. MBA is a new to me brand, but I know they have a lot of products in their line. So this palette is greens. I really think this is pretty. We have green and neutral shades, and these shades are all beautiful. It's just a pretty palette, and I would love to know if you've tried the brand. If you have a favorite palette from them, definitely let me know because I'm interested in trying more. But I do have a palette, only one, and I wanted to show you. I have only ever tried one palette from Touch of Glam, and that is the Not Your Basic Batch palette. This is beautiful. If you have not seen this palette, look at this inside. This is sparkly shades that have a lot of shift and shine and sparkle. These are magnetic pans, so you can pop them out, rearrange them, mix them and match them with other palettes if you want to. Just beautiful, beautiful shadows. Martine Cosmetics is an independently owned brand, owned and founded by another creator here. So I love their stuff. They make some really cool stuff. They are a European-based brand. This is their Moolah palette. This is a really cool palette. This one is slim. It's one of the most like thin packaging because Martine Cosmetics really loves to do over-the-top packaging, but it's like a credit card and you open it up and you see why I love it. You have these beautiful greens, you have some neutral shades, you have some beautiful orangey golds, some kind of bronze colors. Really, really cute. These are very easy to work with shadows. If you were a beginner in shadows, I think you'll really get on with these. The mattes are pigmented, but they're not so pigmented that they will scare you when you apply them. You can build them up, you can blend them out, you can pack them on, you can layer. The shimmers are very beautiful. They're very smooth. So again, if you have texture, I think you'll really like these shadows. They're really, really beautiful. And I think Martine Cosmetics has some really fun launches. I love talking about eyeshadow palettes. If you want me to do any type of eyeshadow palette video, please let me know your suggestions down in the comments because I love to talk about eyeshadow palettes. I'm going to pop up some other videos here for you. I would love it if you would stick around, talk with me, and let me know your favorite indie brands and indie eyeshadow palettes down below in the comments.